After leaving the gate with a click, I headed in the direction of my sister's vehicle. I inhaled deeply. The air on this side of the wall was the same air I was walking in, but for some reason, it smelled sweeter and fresher. Marcy hugged me and asked, "Is there anything you'd like to do before I take you home? Do you have a specific location in mind to visit?" "Indeed, I suppose there is. A nice, cold beer would be perfect." "You understand. Which bar would you like to visit?" "You bet." As we departed from the walls made of grey stone, I reflected on what had brought me there. When Amy came toward me on her father's arm that lovely July day, it was an extremely unpleasant divorce, something you could never have imagined. Since the second grade, Amy and I have been a couple, and everyone knew that we would not get married. We were meant to be together forever, a fairy tale couple with a, and they lived happily ever after, conclusion. We decided that we wanted to travel and experience new things before we settled down, so we decided to wait until after we graduated from college to get married and to wait until we were 30 to have children. Of course, it wasn't all storybook perfect. Twice, in our sophomore year of college and in the 11th grade, Amy thought she should be aware of the characteristics of other boys. After just 3 weeks of high school, Amy returned and apologized, saying that what she had done was foolish. All 5 of the guys I dated were complete jerks. Even though I had the best, I nearly ruined it. I didn't think about going out with other girls because I was too preoccupied with my classes and sports. It hurt both times, but when she did it again in college, I picked myself up and told myself, "All right, you want to see who else is dating? I'll simply venture out and discover the personalities of other girls." Not many other girls were as adamant as Amy that they were virgins walking down the aisle, as I soon discovered. During a span of 5 weeks, I lost my virginity to Bev Holbrook, experienced the delight of BJ from Nancy Newbert, and learned about alternative forms of sexual expression from Harina Collins. How to do 69 best was taught to me by Pauline French. The only chink in my armor was the nagging suspicion that Amy was getting the same education. Even though I knew that what I was doing with Amy was double standard, I still felt that I ought to have done it first. After Amy left to see what other guys were like, it was one evening, maybe 6 weeks later, when I got home from class and saw Amy sitting on the front porch steps. I had the best all along and didn't realize it. It was like the high school drama all over again. Please pardon me, I had loved her for damned near eternity, so I was bound to forgive her. We never discussed our past together, but when I tried to have a sexual relationship with her, she told me she preferred to wait until we were married, so I didn't press the issue. Nevertheless, I wasn't shocked when she wasn't a virgin when we got in our marriage bed. I could tell she knew I wasn't her first, even though I didn't say so. The next 4 years were fairly good for both of us after we secured solid jobs in our fields of interest. As part of my job, I had to travel occasionally, but never for more than 3 days at a time. Amy informed me of her pregnancy the day following her 26th birthday. We had decided to wait until we were 30 before starting a family, so I was taken aback. She informed me that her doctor said the medications she took for the flu had cancelled out the effects of her birth control pills. 9 months on, Brian Lewis came on board. After only 6 weeks off, Amy returned to work with Brian accompanying her, as her workplace had a daycare center on site. After 9 months, she expressed her desire to have another child so that they would be closer and easier to raise now that we had started a family. I said okay because I didn't really care. She informed me that I would become a father once more 6 weeks later. She told me in her 8th month that she felt 2 children was enough and asked if I would mind if her tubes were tied. I had the mindset that it was her body, and who was I to say she had to spend 9 months walking around pregnant? Susan Marie was a blessing to us a month later. Similar to Brian, Amy took a mere 6 weeks off from work before returning to her job and bringing both of her children with her. Amy and I both received promotions twice during the course of the following 6 years, and we were both earning respectable salaries. We were still fairly active in the bedroom and rarely got into arguments, so we seemed like the ideal couple. We were getting married for about the same amount of time, and we were getting married 3 times a week on average, which I was told was pretty good. We enjoyed going places and doing things together, shared similar tastes in music, and looked forward to seeing each other every day after work. However, as I discovered one day in July, the idyllic home life and loving couple thing was a lie. To see if I could learn why one of our suppliers was struggling to meet their delivery deadlines, I had taken a plane to Denver. Although the trip was only supposed to last 3 days, when I arrived, I discovered that the IRS had already seized the company because payroll taxes had not been paid. It transpired that the business had been experiencing financial difficulties for some time. I pivoted and made my way back to the airport, in time to board the subsequent flight back home. Fortunately, I didn't think to call Amy to let her know I was heading home early, otherwise, I might never have found out what I had done. When I arrived home at 5:20, Amy hadn't yet returned from her job. I debated starting dinner, but ultimately chose to take Amy and the children out to eat. I knew Amy was home when I heard the garage door open and start up while I was in the room we had designated as our home office. When I finished completing all the steps to save my work and exit the computer program, Amy had already arrived home. Amy said, "Stop that," and I heard a man's voice say, "You don't want me to stop, and you know it." I had just opened the office door. As a matter of fact, I'd rather not wait to enter the bedroom. "I believe I want you more than your couch's back." The man went on, "Jesus, how horny do you have to be?" Amy answered, "Yes, sweetie, and you love it." "Well, it does look kind of nice over the couch's back. Will you just move my underwear to the side, or can I remove them?" "Side, remove them." The last time I just shoved them aside, I almost rubbed my meat raw. "We most certainly don't want to damage your meat." The conversation paused, and then I heard Amy say, "Oh yeah, oh God, yes, that feels so good," and then I heard the sound of flesh hitting flesh, along with all of Amy's familiar moans and other sounds that made me feel like I was dying inside. I went to the living room after pulling out my cell phone and setting it to take pictures. When I walked in on them, I knew who I was going to see. Amy worked for Hal as her supervisor, and I had gotten to know him and his wife from Amy's Christmas parties, picnics, and other company get-togethers. Amy was unaware that I had returned home because I had taken a cab home from the airport after dropping my car off at the dealership for a factory recall on the brakes. The car wouldn't be ready until the following day. When I walked in on them, they were going to be blown away. Before they knew I was in the room, I got 5 good shots of them, and while they were pulling apart frantically, I got 3 more. I put my phone in my pocket and made my way over to Hal. He saw what I had planned to do to my face, and regretfully, I wasn't in the way of him getting to the door. Luckily, for him at least, he'd just unzipped and started with Amy instead of taking off his pants to screw her, so he was able to turn and bolt for the door before I could catch up to him. Amy stuck out her foot and tripped me, but I think I still managed to get a hold of him. As soon as I steadied myself, Hal had already left through the door. I turned and went through Amy's doorway into the kitchen, where I took the phone book out of the cupboard and turned the pages until I found Harold Bartram. Amy asked, "What are you doing?" as she entered the room as I was picking up the phone and entering numbers. I said, "Calling Janet Bartram so I can share the news with her." "Don't do that," Amy hurried over and withdrew the phone cord from the wall socket. "You'll only make things worse. Do you really believe that we don't already have issues? It's okay for Hal to mess up my life between him and Janet, but I have to watch out not to mess up his. It's not that Janet is an innocent party here, and there's no need to harm her. It's not how I see it. She needs to know that her spouse is a cheating a-hole. Okay, fine if she takes it, but from now on, I'm going to ruin his life. I'll start by telling Janet, and if she's interested, I can show her the pictures. I'm going to hire a lawyer and pursue him at work after that. There's probably a policy and procedures manual at your company, and I'm sure it contains information about a supervisor engaging in sexual relations with a subordinate. Subsequently, I will search for him and, upon capturing him, I will batter him nearly unconscious. You don't want to do any of that because it will cost you too much. How do you interpret that? When you go to Janet, she kicks him out, and I kick you out too, moving him in with our kids and me. If you file a lawsuit against our company, Hal and I will be fired, which will leave me jobless. This will simply mean that I will take advantage of you in the divorce and receive hefty alimony and child support. You will serve time in jail for assault if you go find him and beat him up. The best course of action for you to take is to set all of that aside and move on with your life. You must be joking. Proceed with our lives in light of what I've just learned? Why not? For as long as I can remember, Hal and I have been getting together, and it has never hurt us. I've been a wonderful wife to you, we lead a happy life. I really do love you, and we get along great. Why not tell me you love me after you screw that a-hole? It's true that I only see sex in Hal. Just sex, but damned good sex. There's nothing like making matters worse. You tell me that I'm not good in the bedroom after I catch you cheating. I didn't say that you were no good in the bedroom. Then why are you screwing other men? I'm not screwing other men, I've only been with Hal since we have been married. You understand what I mean? You know what, honey, you are a great guy, a great father and husband, and you did all right in the bedroom, but Hal gives me something you can't have. Amazing, really amazing. I'm a fantastic father and husband, but my comfort zone is the bedroom. Knowing that is just wonderful. It didn't sound that way at all. You are perfectly fine in the bedroom. We enjoy wonderful sex lives. It seems not good enough. I promise you, you're fine, baby. You're just fine. But Hal offers me something I need that you just can't give me. Oh, I see. What precisely would that entail? Dimensions? Hal is 11 inches tall, and those inches allow me to do things that you simply cannot. Honey, it shouldn't matter. Our lives have been idyllic up until this point. There's no reason why our good life can't continue. As long as it's okay with me if you occasionally play with 11 inches. It's been going on for years, honey, and it hasn't hurt us. I swear, everything will be fine. You were real, Amy, just totally out of it if you think we can continue after what I saw. I shook my head. However, I have to admit that I'm a little curious. You mentioned that it has been ongoing for years. How long has it been going on, and how did it begin? It began prior to our meeting. We broke up when I was in college because I wanted to see what other guys would be like. That's when it started. It drove me crazy that one of the first people I hooked up with had 10 inches. It seems that guys with a lot of meat spread the word, and the guy with 10 inches told a few other guys about the girl who was completely enthralled with his large tool. Before deciding that you were the one I should be with, I went through 5 of them and enjoyed everything I gained from each of them. That raises 2 inquiries. Firstly, if you were so fixated on big meat, why didn't you marry one of them? Because all of them were a-holes. The girl should be appreciative that they gave her the opportunity to have this experience, as it seemed like they were all content with a large tool. I left them because I needed more than a stuffed feeling and because I loved you. The second question is, why after you had given up your cherry to a big dick a-hole and drilled several of them for almost 6 weeks, did you tell me we couldn't have sex until we got married? I was down on men in general after my experience with the 5, even though I knew I loved you. It was simply not my mood to have sex. That was my initial thought, even though it wasn't fair to you. Everything was good up until, I believe, one of the company Christmas parties, which you were unable to attend due to a business trip to Seattle. Nevertheless, I was feeling a little playful after having a few more drinks than I should have when Hal kissed me and danced with me under the mistletoe. I sensed the sharp instrument piercing my leg. To put it mildly, I was feeling playful, so I pulled a Mae West and asked, "Is that a roll of quarters in your pocket, or are you just glad to see me?" It was much larger than a roll of quarters, Hal recalled, and he had been drinking as well. That's what all the guys say, I chuckled. They might say that, he said, but he could prove it. I chuckled once more and asked him to show me. He did, and I stayed with him for the next 2 evenings. Until he met and wed Janet, we had a hot and heavy relationship. Although we continued to flirt, we didn't stop until Janet became pregnant and began to refuse sex. After that, we never stopped. It hasn't caused us any harm, honey. I have to go pick up the kids from my sister's house. Even your sister stands in for you when you deceive me. Rob, stop being so dumb. She believes that I work late. The kids went straight from school to her house, so I asked her to watch them when they got out. I have to go get them now. I'll prove to you that nothing has changed when I return. I stood there and stared at her in disbelief as she went out to get in her car. Hurt us? Only because I never knew. Going to show me that nothing has changed? When she got home, she expected me to take sloppy seconds after her coupling with Hal. Not bloody likely. I plugged the phone back in and called Janet. She was not pleased to hear what I had to say, and she asked me when we could meet so she can see the pictures that I had taken. We made arrangements to meet for lunch the next day. She asked me not to tell Amy that I had called because Amy would be sure to call Hal and let him know. I'm not going to do anything until I have the evidence, and then I'll confront him. I went upstairs and started moving my things out of the bedroom into the guest bedroom. I was hanging my suits up in the closet when a very bad thought came to me. When Amy said that she would kick me out, she had said, "He can move in here with me and our kids." It didn't register when she said it, but thinking about it after the fact, it sounded like she was saying the kids were hers and Hal's. Could it be? I thought back to when she told me that she had started up with Hal. My trip to Seattle had been about a year before she told me she was pregnant with Brian. So, Hal could very well be the father of my kids. God help the both of them if I found out that he was. I was just putting the last of my things away when Amy came home with the kids. She came looking for me, and when she found me setting up in the guest room, she asked, "What are you doing? Putting space between us?" Why? I told you that when I got back I'd show you that nothing has changed. Have you forgotten what I witnessed 2 hours ago? You expect me to take Hal's sloppy seconds? Oh, for Christ's sake, Rob. It has never hurt you before, but okay, I'll take a shower first. You just don't get it, do you? I don't want to have anything to do with your cheating bum. You are being stupid over this, Rob. I don't love Hal. I love you. I have sex with Hal, but I make love with you. You sure didn't sound like you loved me when you told me you would kick me out and let Hal move in, and I didn't detect a whole lot of love when you were telling me how you were going to screw me in a divorce. I didn't mean it. I just wanted to make you stop and think before calling Janet. Well, I did do some thinking, Amy, and that's why I moved to this bedroom. We are adults, Rob, and we can talk this out and get by it. Nothing has changed. I still love you, just not enough to keep from hanging horns on me. Just leave me alone, Amy. I left the room and went to see the kids. I helped them with their homework and then played with them until their bedtime. Once they were tucked in, I went into my new bedroom and got ready for bed. I heard the shower running as I turned out the light and thought back to what Amy had said. It has never hurt you before. God, what a stupid witch. I was just nodding off when the door opened, and Amy came into the room. She got into bed, and I felt her naked body move against me as she tried to grab me. I quickly sat up and pushed her away from me so hard that she fell off the bed and onto the floor. What part of "I don't want anything to do with your cheating bumps" didn't you understand? Stay the hell away from me, Amy. Damn it, Rob. I love you. We can work this out. I know we can. No, we can't, Amy. Not a prayer. Now get the hell out of here. She got up off the floor and left the room, and I tried to go to sleep. I had a rotten night and was a bit groggy when I got up in the morning. Amy was up and had breakfast ready, but I just walked past her, got my car keys off of the pegboard, and left the house. I had breakfast at a village inn and then went into work at 10. I called my hooper, a good friend who was also an attorney, and told him my sad story. Then I asked if I could make an appointment to see him and talk about divorce. He told me he would meet me at Bud's bar at 5:30. I plugged my cell phone into my computer and transferred the photo I had taken of Amy and Bartram. Then I printed 3 sets and put them in envelopes. At noon, I arrived at Mario's and saw that Janet was already there. She rose to meet me, and I kissed her cheek, saying, "I wish we were meeting under happier circumstances." We made small talk until after we ordered, and then I described what happened the previous day. I passed her an envelope with the photos I'd taken, and she looked at them. I was surprised at how calm she was as she went over them. She slid them back into the envelope and said, "What are you going to do? Divorce her? No chance of fixing things, not after seeing it with my own eyes. Well, I guess I'm going to have to do the same. This is not the first time his large meat has gotten him in trouble. The last time it happened, I forgave him but did tell him if it happened again, he would be history. You may not get the chance to kick him out. I'm going to be looking for him, and when I find him, I'm going to beat him half to death. He could end up in a hospital. You could take all of his stuff and stack it up in his hospital room. If you do catch him, kick him a couple of times in the balls for me." I told her I would, and then we got up and left. My meeting with Mike only confirmed what I already knew. We lived in a no-fault state, so everything would be split 50-50ths. Amy would get the kids, and I would end up paying child support. But since our incomes were pretty much equal, I wouldn't have to pay alimony or separate maintenance, as it was called in our state. I told them I was concerned that the kids were not mine, and he told me to have a DNA test. I gave him 2 sets of the photos and told him I wanted Bartram sued for alienation of affections and the company where they both worked sued for not enforcing their CPNP, where it said that there could be no fraternization between supervisors and their subordinates. "Are you sure you want to do that? It could cost Amy her job, and then you would more than likely end up paying separate maintenance." "I don't care, Mike. Just do it." We discussed a few other things, and he cautioned me against moving out of the house and giving her possession. I couldn't throw her out because of the kids, so I should just do my best to coexist until the situation regarding the divorce firmed up and the court gave directions. Let the courts decide who stayed and who went, but be aware that the courts in this state almost always side with the wife if there are children in the equation. You were in for a rough ride. But are you sure that you and Amy can't work things out? Just look at the pictures. They don't have the sounds that I heard when I watched the 2 of them, but the visual and the sound are burned into my brain, so no, there is no chance that we will be getting back together and working things out. Just get the ball rolling and serve her as soon as you can. Have her and Hal served at work if you can arrange it. Amy was not smiling when I got home. You just had to do it. We could have worked things out and gotten by it, but you just had to go and tell Janet. She kicked him out of the house, and all because of you, not because of me, Amy. Because of what you and he were doing, and I'm sorry that she kicked him out. It will just make it that much harder to find him, and when I do, I can promise you that huge meat you are so in love with isn't going to be working it that well for a while. Just remember that I warned you, Rob. That night, I got up at 3 o'clock while everyone else in the house was sleeping and, using Q-tips, I swabbed the cheeks of my sleeping children. I dropped the swabs off at a local lab on my way to work and offered to pay extra if there was any way that the tests could be expedited. Something in the way that Amy had said, "Just remember that I warned you, Rob," got to me, and I was at the bank when the doors to the lobby opened at 9. I cleaned out all of the accounts in the safe deposit box and went down the street to another bank and opened an account in my name only. I'd have to account for it later on in the divorce, but at least I would have the funds to make the house payments and take care of the kids. Back at the office, I had another thought and I called up and cancelled all of our joint credit cards so Amy couldn't run up the balances getting cash advances. It was a good thing that I'd done all of that because when I got home that night, a man walked up to me, handed me an envelope, and said, "You were served, and I would suggest you move at least 500 feet from this house because there is a temporary restraining order in that envelope." I opened the envelope, and there was indeed a restraint order saying that I couldn't come within 500 feet of the house, Amy, or the kids. Her attorney obviously worked a hell of a lot faster than Mike, but I guess in his defense, he didn't know that speed was required, and for that matter, neither had I. I looked up at the house and saw Amy standing there, smirking at me. I backed the car out of the drive and drove down to the corner and called Mike on his cell. I brought him up to date and asked how I could go about getting into the house to get my things. He told me he had some friends in the sheriff's department and he would see what he could do and call me back. While I had him on the phone, I told him to change the divorce from irreconcilable differences to adultery and to go after Bartram and Amy and Bartram's company with a vengeance. Burn them, Mike, burn them bad. He called me back in 15 minutes and told me that 2 deputies would be there within a half an hour and would see to it that I gained access to the house. But until he could get someone from the court to make further arrangements, all I would be able to remove from the house would be my clothes and toiletries. 20 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled up in front of the house, and I started up my car and parked behind them. They introduced themselves and told me to stay where I was until they called me. Then they walked up to the house and rang the bell. Amy answered, and after a moment of talking, the deputies waved me forward. They cautioned me that I could only take clothes and my toiletries, and then I followed them into the house. As I was walking toward the stairs, I glanced into the kitchen to see if the kids were there. They weren't, but Hal was sitting at the kitchen table with a beer in front of him, a beer that I had bought and paid for. It was all I could do to keep myself from going after him, but it would have been stupid with 2 deputies right there. Amy followed us upstairs and stood in the doorway and watched me pack. It was childish of me, but I couldn't resist. So, I lied and said without looking her way, "You blew it, Amy. You really screwed up this time." I spent most of the day at the office thinking about us, and I finally decided that we could sit down and work things out. After all, you did swear that you loved me, some loving, Amy, mental cruelty, a restraining order, no chance for us now, Amy, think about that after I leave. We were hours away from staying together, but you screwed it up, and Hal sitting in the kitchen drinking my beer put the nail in it. I closed the suitcase, turned, and walked out of the house. The next day, Amy called me at work. "In light of what you said at the house last night, I'd like to sit down and talk with you." "Not a chance in hell, Amy. What you did to me yesterday, plus Hal sitting in the house you locked me out of, put an end to it and killed any chance for us. Besides, I can't sit down and talk with you. You set it up so I can't come within 500 feet of you, remember? Goodbye, Amy." 2 days later, I was back at the house with 2 people from the court who would supervise the removal of my things from the house. The entire time I was there, Amy kept after me to sit down and talk with her, but I ignored her right up until I was taking the last load out to the U-Haul. We were in the bedroom, and she was babbling that we could work things out if I would just talk with her. I motioned her over, and when she came, I pointed into the master bedroom bath area. She saw what I was pointing at, and her face fell. On the counter were a man's toiletries, and they weren't mine. I didn't use Old Spice or Men and Speed Stick. Goodbye, Amy. Just remember that what is coming you brought on yourself, and it could have been avoided. Things moved quickly after that. Amy was served at work with papers, countersuing her on the grounds of adultery. Hal was served also at work with papers, suing him for alienation of affections. Their employer was sued for not enforcing the portion of their policies and procedures manual pertaining to relationships between supervisors and subordinates, resulting in the dissolution of my marriage. 3 days later, both Hal and Amy were fired. Hal, being Amy's supervisor, was screwed. But Amy fought her termination, claiming that Hal threatened to cost her her job if she didn't give in. The company didn't buy it and upheld her termination. So, Amy got her lawyer to sue them for wrongful termination. She and Hal must have agreed that Amy's claiming what she did was the way to go because while all of it was going on, they were still living in our house. 3 weeks after having me served, we had the hearing on extending the temporary restraining order, and the judge denied it and chastised Amy's lawyer for even filing it. A week later, we had the preliminary hearing on the divorce. Mike warned me that things were not going to go in my favor. They will almost certainly give Amy temporary custody of the children and full use of the house until the terms of the divorce can be worked out. And you will be required to keep up the house payments and pay the utilities. You will also likely be hit with temporary alimony and child support. Her attorney is also pressing to get the money you took out of the accounts, and I'm sure that the judge will bring that up. I handed him an envelope and said, this might have an effect on the child support issue. He opened it, read what was inside, and said, Rob, I'm so sorry for you. Any idea who the real father is? I bet Amy's life at their house. It may have no effect on this hearing because it is just a preliminary hearing, and Child Protection Services is going to want to verify the authenticity of the documents, but it will definitely affect the final decree.
Will I get a chance to talk?
Yes, but I'd be very careful about what I'd say if I were you. It went pretty much as Mike had said it would. Amy was given the house, the kids, and temporary alimony. I was ordered to pay Amy half of what I'd removed from checking and savings, but some of the 5 certificates of deposit got overlooked, and I sure didn't mention them. Amy's attorney tried to get the judge to order me to pay his fees, but Mike objected. This is not a case of my client suing for divorce and his wife having to respond. In this case, she sued my client, and he only responded. Since his wife initiated the action, she should be responsible for her own legal costs. The judge found for us on that one, and it brought a bit of a smile to my face. When the judge, following the advice of Child Protective Services, set the child support, Mike objected and presented the DNA test document showing that I was not the biological father of the kids. I was ordered to pay temporary child support pending CPS verifying the document. If, in fact, the document proved to be true, any support you will have paid will be deducted from your wife's share of the distribution. I was watching Amy when Mike brought up the paternity of the kids, and she didn't register any surprise. The witch knew all along. When it came to the end, the judge asked me if I fully understood the orders of the court. I understand what you said, but I don't understand why. Why is my adulterous wife being allowed the custody of the children? Surely it is not beneficial to them to be living with a woman who moved her lover into the house the very day she sued me for divorce. What kind of example does that set for them? We haven't even been separate for 6 weeks, and she already has another man in her bed. Also, why should I have to maintain a house just so the man my 304 of a wife cheated on me with has a roof over his head? All the judge did was order CPS to investigate my claims and submit a report to him within 10 days. As we were leaving the courtroom, Amy moved close to me and said, "How could you do that to your children?" "They aren't mine, Amy." "And I saw your face when Mike brought up the DNA issue." "No surprise on your face, Amy." "No surprise at all. You've known it all the time. Just one more thing that I owe you for." "Yeah, right, whatever. Just make sure that I have the money tomorrow." And she walked away. She didn't know it, but she could suck eggs as far as getting a dime of that money was concerned, at least anytime soon. I figured that I could stretch it out for weeks before they hauled me into court and threatened me with contempt of court if I didn't pay. Even then, I could probably hold off another week or 2. The day after the hearing, Mike called me and told me that Amy's ex-employer had offered a settlement. "It's a little on the low side, and I think we can do better. I'll leave it up to you since you are the expert in these things." Although, to be honest, the only reason I sued them to begin with was to screw over Amy and Bartram. I was satisfied that they got canned. While we are on the subject, you know we won't get anything out of Bartram, especially since he is out of work, and what little he can come up with will go to his wife for child support and alimony. No matter, keep on it and force him to have to pay an attorney. If we win, we can get a judgment against him, and it will always be hanging over him like a big black cloud. Mike's mention of having to pay alimony reminded me that I hadn't talked to Janet in a while. I gave her a call and asked how things were going. Not well. Things are a little tight with Hal not working and not paying what the court ordered him to pay. Luckily, I emptied out the bank accounts before kicking him out. I hate to tell you this, but things are likely to get worse. It turns out that both of my kids share Hal as a biological father, and he is very likely going to have to pay Amy child support by the time my divorce is final. Or maybe not, since they are living together. They are? I didn't know that. How are you coming with your suit against Hal's old company? I don't have a suit against them. Why would I? I explained it to her, and she thanked me for the information and said she would have her attorney look into it. Then I said, if I can be of any help, just let me know. I hope you aren't suggesting what I think you are. What would that be? Just because Hal screwed your wife doesn't mean that I'll do you to get even. That is a rotten thing to think or say. Sorry to have bothered you, and I hung up on her. What she had said at the end of the call left a bad taste in my mouth and put me in a foul mood, and I stayed in that mood all day. By the time I got off work, I wanted to hurt someone, and I decided that it was time to settle up with Hal. Working on the assumption that since he was out of work, he would be looking for a job, I arranged to take the next day off work. At 6 o'clock in the morning, I was parked up the street from the house. The kids left for school at 7:20, and at 8 o'clock, I saw a Chevy Blazer back out of my garage and head off down the street. I followed into a downtown parking garage. I parked 3 spaces down from him, got out of my car, and ducked down. I was between him and the elevator, and when he got to where I was crouching, I stood up and said, "Good morning, Hal. At least it is for me, but I'm not so sure that it will be for you." He turned and tried to run, but I grabbed him, spun him around, and slammed him into one of the concrete support pillars. Then, I proceeded to beat the living out of him. I ended things with 6 very hard kicks to his crotch, and then I left him lying on the concrete floor whimpering. It came as no surprise when, the next day at work, 2 cops showed up and arrested me for assault and battery. I sat in jail overnight and was taken in front of a judge the next day. The charges were read, and I was asked how I pled. I said not guilty.
Are you sure that you want to plead not guilty, Mr. Bartram?
Mr. Bartram is quite positive that you were his assailant. Oh, I stomped his bum, sure enough, but I'm not guilty of assault and battery.
No? What would you call it, then?
Seeing to it that justice was done. I don't understand your thinking. He screwed my wife behind my back for years, he fathered the 2 children that he and my witch of an about-to-be ex-wife led me to believe were mine, and he had to pay for it. That may be, but in this state, there is no law against adultery, and that is why I had to seek justice on my own. I don't care about the law. The legal system sucks when it comes to cases like mine. My wife cheats on me for years, and sticks me with her lover's kids, and what do the courts do? They reward her. She gets the home, and I'm ordered to pay for it and its upkeep. And while I'm doing it, she moves her lover in, and I end up paying for him to have a roof over his head. I have to pay her cheating bum alimony, and when the divorce becomes final, she will get half of everything. She cheats, and the courts reward her. And the wrong party, me, gets it broke off in him by the same legal system that you were touting. If the law won't do right by me, then I have to do it myself. You still broke the law, and by your own admission, you acknowledge that. No, I am not. I am admitting to seeking the justice that I am owed. I'm perfectly willing to let a jury hear my story and decide. You may be willing, but I have no intention of allowing the court's resources to be wasted on trying the case. You have admitted in open court that you, as you put it, stomped his bum, so I have no choice but to find you guilty and sentence you to 6 months in the county facility at Fairmorn.
Thank you. I beg your pardon?
You just helped me get some justice where my wife is concerned. For 6 months, she will receive no alimony or child support. The house payment won't be made by me, and since she was fired from her job, she has no money and won't be able to make a house payment. The house will go into foreclosure, and she and her lover will be kicked out onto the street. And that 6 months in jail means that I'll lose my job, so she won't be able to get any money from me when I get out. So, yes, thank you.
You would throw away the equity in your house? What equity?
We took out a second to put in central air conditioning and a swimming pool. If we sold it, we would get enough out of it to cover costs and commissions, with maybe a couple of thousand to split between us. I'd rather see that she loses even that much. I wouldn't get anything out of it anyway. By the time I get out of jail, I'll owe her 6 months of back alimony, and I'm sure that this wonderful legal system of yours would see to it that my share of the proceeds would be seized and given to her to cover the arrears. The judge just shook his head. I spent for months in the county jail. Mike came to visit me once a week, and on his 3rd visit, he said he had an offer from Amy's old company that he thought we should take. Cash the check as soon as you get it and put the money somewhere where Amy can't get to it. At the end of my 1st month, I had a surprise visitor. Amy came down to see me. When you were in jail, they don't let just anyone visit you. You have to give them a list of people you are willing to see, and if anyone not on that list comes to see you, they come to you and ask you if you want to see the person. Amy was not on my list, but curiosity made me agree to see her. I took a seat across from her, with the visiting room partition between us, and Amy smiled and said, "Orange is not your color. My wardrobe in here is somewhat limited." "What do you want, Amy?" "I want you to arrange for me to get some money. The house payment is due, and the utility bills need to be covered. I haven't had much luck in finding a job, and things are getting tight. It is a struggle to put food on the table for the kids. So, if your a-hole lover had taken his beating as he justly deserved for screwing my wife, instead of filing charges against me, I wouldn't be in here, and your money worries wouldn't be so bad. But he did put me in here, so take your money problems to him. As far as food on the table for the kids goes, let him feed them." "How can you say that?" "True, he was the sperm donor, but you were their dad. You are the only father they have ever known. They don't know anything about, how do they know that he is in our house and that you were screwing him while, by the way, you were still married to me? What I'm saying is that you are their father, Rob. You have been there for them since day one, and you love them to death. Right up to finding out about how, and me, you can't just turn that love off, Rob. They did nothing to hurt you. Hate me, but don't take out what I did on them. The problem, Amy, is that if I give you money for food, it won't be just the kids eating that food. I'd be feeding you and Bartram as well. I've loved you too long to ever raise my hand against you and do what I did to Bartram. But it won't bother me at all to watch the both of you starve. You don't care that we will lose the house if you don't help? You mean the house you locked me out of? The house you screwed your lover in whenever you could? That house means nothing to me since you moved Bartram into it. You need to look harder for work, Amy, and you need to push Bartram to step up since he is now the head of your household. He is having trouble finding work, and what little he does come up with, Janet manages to get. Well, at least he has that big tool that you are so in love with, so things aren't a total loss for you. That's a laugh, Rob. It hasn't worked all that well since you worked him over. Gee, Amy, I'm so sorry I messed up your life. What is it they always say? Life's a witch. I got up and walked away. My only other regular visitor was my sister Megan. She came once a week, and on one of her visits about 3 weeks after Amy's, she told me that Amy had called her and had asked her to intercede and try to get me to give her some money. She swears she will only use it for the kids. I think you ought to do it, Rob. I don't want to see the kids suffer. But my plan is to go for full custody when I get out, and my only hope is to be able to show that she can't take care of them properly, and that she is setting a bad example for them by living in sin with Bartram. If she and their a-hole of a biological father can't even feed them, the courts will have to give me a look. The fact that I want them, even though Bartram is their sperm donor, should show how much I care for them. If I give her any help, it will defeat my purpose. Besides, I don't care what she says, because I don't trust her. She stabbed me in the back with a smile on her face for over 6 years, so there is no way I'll ever believe a word she says. Are you going to get upset with me if I help them? I'm in jail, Megan. I can't stop you from doing anything you want to do. Megan did help them, but not with money. She bought the kids some clothes, and maybe once a week, she took some groceries over to them. From Megan, I found out that Amy had finally managed to find a decent paying job. I also found out from her that things were not going all that well in the household. It seems that since Bartram couldn't find a job worthy of him, he stopped looking altogether. There were jobs out there, but apparently, they were beneath him or didn't pay enough to suit him. From visits with the kids, Megan found out that Bartram and Amy argued a lot about his sitting around the house on his bed all day. I got a huge smile out of that. In my 3rd month, I received another surprise visitor. Janet showed up on visiting day. Since she wasn't on my list of visitors, they asked me if I was willing to see her. As with Amy, curiosity got me to say yes. I remembered our last conversation and wondered why she wanted to see me. There was a touch of déjà vu when I sat down across from her, and she said, or is so not your color? I've been told that. What brings you here? Guilt. Guilt. What are you guilty of? Treating you shabbily? Oh, when was that? The last time we talked on the phone. I was in a rotten mood and down on men in general, but that was still no reason for me to say what I said to you, and I apologize for it. Well, I do admit that it pissed me off, but no real harm done. Also, I wanted to thank you for one small pleasure that you gave me. I gave you a small pleasure? You didn't know it, but you did. One of my sorority sisters from college is a nurse at our doctor's office, and Hal still goes to that doctor. Marcia tells me that Hal has been in several times to talk to Dr. Marlin about erectile problems he is having. It seems that you did a number on his genitals, and he is having a hard time getting it up and keeping it up. It does my heart good to know that he can't use the thing he used to cheat on me with. You might find some pleasure in knowing that your wife isn't getting any pleasure out of what she cheated on you for. It does? Oh, yes, indeed it does. We talked a little more before she left, and she made me promise to call her when I got out. I spent for months in the county jail and was released early when overcrowding became a problem. I qualified because I had already served 2/3 of my sentence, and even though I was in for assault, which was a violent crime, I was not considered a danger to society. Mike was waiting for me to give me a ride when I was released. He drove me to a motel that had weekly rates, and I took a room until I could find me an apartment. On the drive, he brought me up to date on things. Amy isn't fighting the divorce, but she is going to fight for custody of the kids, alimony, and she is even going to try for child support, even though I don't believe she has a chance in hell of getting it. Now that you are out, I'll petition for a hearing, and after that, it will just be a matter of time. Have you decided what you were going to do with the settlement check you got from Amy's employer? Just put it somewhere out of Amy's reach until the divorce is final. Now that you are out, you can expect to be dragged back into court over the funds you were ordered to pay Amy. No biggie. My excuse will be that I couldn't very well get the money for her while I was locked up. They will say that you could have made arrangements and let the witch know where I bank. No way. She would find a way to get it all, or what was there, and given the way courts in this state bend over backwards for women, that would probably help her. The 304 stabbed me in the back and lied to me for years. No way would I trust her not to screw me if she could. When I stopped by the office the following morning to see if Frank had any openings, he told me to go get my ass and stop bothering him with meaningless questions. When I told Amy I wanted to see the kids that afternoon over the phone, she laughed at me. When I see some money, you can see the kids. After hanging up with her, I gave Child Protection Services a call. Amy wouldn't let me see the kids when I asked to see them. I was told she had that right. She was free to say no if she didn't want me to see them. Your documentation was accurate when we reviewed it. She is in charge because you are not the paternal parent and she is the maternal parent. If you have any visiting rights, the courts will have to make that decision. So, I'm not required to pay child support? The court will also have to make a decision on that. You must appear in court to have the support order that is currently imposed upon you lifted. I guess that I can take it from your attitude that my chance of getting custody of them is unlikely? I'm not at liberty to discuss what our recommendations to the court might be. I hung up after thanking her for her time. I gave Amy a call back and said I would bring money and that I would be dropping by to see the kids at 7. You won't be left by yourself with them. I'll be there the whole time you're here. I took out $500 from the bank and placed it in an envelope. Amy answered the door when I rang the doorbell at precisely 7. When I gave her the envelope, she looked inside, saw the money, and moved aside to let me in. When I entered the living room and saw Bartram seated, I nearly passed out. I'm not sure what expression I made, but he gave it one glance, got up, and hurried out of the room. Sitting on the couch, Brian and Susan were staring at me. Since I hadn't seen them in more than 4 months, I had anticipated that they would rouse and run to me, exclaiming, "Daddy! Daddy!" But they just sat there, and Susan said the words, "Why did you hurt our father?" that ultimately led to my imprisonment. I thought I was your father. Mommy told us that you aren't and that Daddy How is our father. Amy was grinning at me when I turned to look at her. I ignored the children and made my way to the door. Hurry back, exclaimed Amy, laughing. Eat and die, you worthless 304. I growled as I snatched the envelope out of her hand as I passed her. After that, things happened very fast. I was hauled into court and told to give Amy back child support and alimony in addition to what the courts had originally ordered. I threatened to kill the judge before I gave the dishonest 300 and for a single penny. I told him that was the first time he had been correct that day when he threatened to hold me in contempt of court if I didn't comply. After dropping his gavel, he declared $500 or 30 days. I went with the 30. When I was brought back before the judge on the 29th day, he asked if I had changed my mind. I replied that I had, in a way. Would you care to explain that? CPS can substantiate my claim that I am not the children's father, and I refuse to pay child support and back child support on children that even the court knows aren't mine. I'd be happy to pay alimony, but as long as the woman I regretfully remain married to lives in the house with her lover, I will not be making any house payments. I'm not going to pay to cover that man's rent. I'll cover the mortgage if you get him out and keep him out. You were saying that CPS knows that you are not the father of the children. They do. I will continue this hearing until tomorrow and until I can check out your statement with CPS. I noticed Amy's expression as she was being led out of the courtroom. She was furious because she knew the child support decision would be made in my favor. She was quite confident that she could pull a fast one on me once more. The following morning, I appeared in court again, but the result did not meet my expectations. The CPS investigation report proved that Hal was actually residing with Amy and that I was not the child's father. The child support was thrown out by the judge, who also retroactively cut Amy's alimony by a third. Nevertheless, I was still required to make the house and mortgage payments. Since Mrs. Ludi has taken in a boarder, she can be responsible for all the utilities and the insurance on the house, he said, shocking everyone, especially Amy. I was ready to say, screw you, and wait another 30 days, but at that point, I made the decision to pay. My thought process about it was a little strange. I made the decision that although Amy would be furious with the judge for what she had done, she would be cheered up by seeing me return to jail. However, though I would be paying her a third less than she expected, plus there would be no child support, and I would give her a sly smile as we left the court, the knowledge that she would be receiving some money from me would make her feel better. The judge gave me a 48-hour deadline to turn in the money or he would issue a bench warrant for my arrest. It brightened my day that Amy seemed irritated by the grin and smirk I gave her as I left the courtroom. After being returned to the jail and processed, I made my way to a restaurant in search of a satisfying meal. I went to my sister's after dinner to pick up my things, which she had taken from my motel when I was arrested. After we had a long conversation, I mentioned how Amy had brainwashed the kids. Megan advised me not to get too attached to it. They're just kids, and Amy was the only one who spoke to them because you weren't present. Young children are susceptible to impressions. You'll have an opportunity to speak with them. However, I never did. During the last decree hearing, I felt completely overwhelmed. I was not even allowed to have visitation rights. Amy was granted sole custody. According to the CPS report, the children's mother and biological father believed that I would cause too much disruption in their lives and that it would be best for the children's interests if I didn't live with them because the biological father planned to marry the mother and start a family. Next, the judge mandated that Amy be allowed to stay in the family house until the kids turned 18, after which the house could be sold and the money divided between us. The clause that stated the house could be sold if Amy got married was added. I was ordered to continue paying the reduced alimony for a period of 3 years, or until Amy remarried, whichever came first. I was furious when I walked out of the courtroom, and Amy gave me the finger and smiled at me. After thinking about it for almost a week, I finally lost my cool and started making plans. I freely acknowledge that my judgment was clouded, but Amy has let me down too much, and I snapped. I cancelled the homeowner's insurance and started keeping an eye on the house, anticipating my chance. Amy called me for several days after I cancelled the insurance. The mortgage company called and said you can't cancel the insurance. Yes, I did. You've screwed me over so much that I'm looking for ways to save money. Allstate is offering me a better deal on the same coverage. The mortgage company informed you that if they don't receive a policy for the house within 5 days, they will get one and charge you for it. The woman I spoke with indicated that since the insurance company they use is often fairly expensive, it would be beneficial for us to get the policy in place. I'm on it. After that phone call, 2 days later, I was given the chance I had been waiting for. Half an hour after the kids left for school, Amy left for work, and at 8:30, Bartram drove away in his Blazer out of the garage. I drove up, unlocked the garage door, and pressed the button on the garage door opener as soon as he was out of sight. And, whoa, it worked. I pulled into the garage, shutting the door behind me, and removed the 2 5-gallon gasoline cans from the car's trunk. I entered the house and gave it a thorough cleaning before pulling my car out of the garage. I returned inside and lit the house on fire. After making my way to the airport, I parked in long-term parking and boarded a flight headed for Panama City. I chased girls and lazed in the sun for a whole month. I managed to catch a few of them. On my last day in Panama City, I made a 10-year advance payment at a bank to rent a safe deposit box. Before I left for Florida, I had cleared out all of my accounts, and I placed the money in the deposit box. Even though I knew I would probably have to serve time for what I had done, I didn't care because I had messed with Amy. Roy, there was no insurance to replace anything that she would have lost in the fire. She would definitely follow me to get it, but if I was in jail or prison, she would never be able to extract even a single penny from me, let alone a single one. I went to the shop to retrieve some personal belongings I had left behind when I returned to town, and I apologized to Frank for abandoning him there. He told me that having gone through a fairly acrimonious divorce himself, he understood. He then inquired as to whether I was prepared to return to work after getting everything out of my system. I had to tell him no, that I would most likely spend some time in jail. I answered his question about why. He chuckled and expressed his wish that he had the courage to hurt his former partner in that way. I invited Mike to lunch over the phone. When he sat down, he told me, "You have really stepped into it this time, after we met at Mario's. Everyone is vying for your behind. It would have been wiser for you to remain where you were." Since the judge had given you instructions to keep up the house, he considered what you did to be contempt of court. You are wanted by the DA on a number of charges, including arson and destruction of private property. Amy wants to nail to a telephone pole so she can beat you with a bullwhip 2 or 3 times a day. But you'll be happy to hear that as soon as Amy was unable to provide him with a roof over his head, how can they make arson stick? I didn't cheat the insurance company, it was my house. In order to prevent them from being stuck for anything, I actually cancelled the insurance. I'm still responsible for the loan, and I just sent the mortgage company this month's payment, so I'm sure they're furious that I don't have any collateral. They have nothing coming in as long as I'm the one making the payments. It was my home. I was free to use it however I pleased. In your mind maybe, but I can assure you that the court will not see it that way. Naturally, he was correct, and following a month of haggling, I managed to reach a plea deal that would have seen me serve 3 years in the state correctional facility in Alabama. You were granted parole after serving half of your sentence, but I declined the offer when it was made. I refused to surrender to the courts, which I had grown to despise, and endure the threats of "do this or I'll have to send you back," or "you can't do that or you will be violating your parole." After 2.5 months of time off for good behavior, I was finally released. Mike, my sister, and even Frank paid me regular visits and insisted that I see him once I was released. Janet even made me promise to call her when I had some free time when she visited me a few times. In addition, I was able to file for bankruptcy during my stay and get rid of all the judgments against me save the IRS one. It appears that I broke one of their regulations when I declared the interest on the house on my tax return. Considering that the house was no longer genuinely there. Megan asked me what was next as we sat at the table in Bud's bar and I had a cold PBR. Go see Frank and get back to work, find an apartment, and see what I can do to start having some kind of social life.
You're going to see the kids?
Most likely not. I think Amy did a pretty good job of brainwashing them, because if I saw them, I would automatically want to put my fingers around Amy's throat and squeeze. She is also not interested in seeing you. Though she has changed over the past few years, he still wants to chop off your head for burning up everything she owned. She sincerely apologizes for the outcome of the situation. She genuinely believed that she could have both her cake and her pie. She claims to have loved you, that it was just sex, and that you weren't meant to know about him. In any case, she has said that she wouldn't object if you dated Brian and Susan. I mean, really, after telling them that I wasn't really their father, isn't that big of her? Rob, give her a break. You were doing the same thing that she was doing. The children were caught in the middle as you two were acting out of spite. They have come to stay with me on a few weekends, and I can tell they miss you. You should get back in touch with them. I'd prefer not to see Amy. We can see how it goes if you can make plans with her to have her pick them up and bring them to your home. Frank told me I could resume whenever I was ready when I stopped in. I asked him to wait a week for me to get used to being alone. After taking my money out of the safe deposit box, I took a plane to Panama City and returned home. I got my IRS issues resolved, located an apartment, and gave Janet a call to ask her to supper. My relationship with my children did improve, and we now spend every other weekend together. I went on several dates with Janet, but it was clear that our relationship would never extend beyond friendship. I did manage to find a girlfriend, and it appears that we will exchange vows soon. To be willing to burden herself with 2 children simply to be with me, she must be an amazing person. Yes, I now have the children. Amy met and married a man, but after 2 years of marriage, he returned home early and discovered Amy having an affair with another man. Sadly for Amy and her partner, her spouse wasn't the type to whip out a smartphone and snap images the way I did. Taking out a gun, hubby shot and killed them both. He received 20 to life because our state does not allow the death penalty. Every month, I give him a box of cigarettes and a card of appreciation. I asked the court for custody after Amy left, and it was approved. They now share my home. I suppose it's true what they say, at least for some of us, that everything works out in the end. Please feel free to express your opinions in the space provided for comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.